So in New York City right now, where I'm located, we are starting the first of what is forecast to be 4 or 5 days of 90-degree weather or so, probably 20 degrees warmer than normal. And this is part of the new normal, unfortunately. The consumption and disposal of materials and ensuring that is done safely is an incredibly important role for the um, materials management industry. And so um, the uh, let me just stop my share. Okay, sorry. So the waste industry has a very important a role to play in the environment. And so this is why we tried to create a framework for sustainable materials management with SWEEP. And we've, you know, done something that for whatever reason, nobody else wanted to take on for about 50 years. And, given that the challenges of, developing a framework, creating a consistent set of metrics, and then getting people to foolishly step into the lion's jaws. It's no small job, but Mount Diablo is the first platinum sweep certified program in the world, and we're very fortunate to have Kish Rajan here with us and Bart Miller. So Kish, maybe just take a minute to introduce you and Mount Diablo, and then we can start having our conversation about the process, what worked, what didn't work, etc.
Yeah, you bet. Well, Rob, thanks a lot. Thanks for having us. We're very proud, and we are happy to tell people that we're the first platinum level achiever in the world. It's a wonderful distinction and something that is a real badge of honor for us and the company. And so we appreciate the work that we've done together with you and your team, and happy to be here to talk about it today. So yeah, so Mount Diablo, we're a local waste and recycling company here in Northern California, just in the East San Francisco Bay Area. It's a family-owned, multi-generational business. Business history goes back some almost 90 years. Um, Today, we are a largely integrated waste hauling and processing company, serving a series of communities out here in the East Bay. In total, about 300,000 people in population that we cover. We roll collection vehicles to the local residents and local businesses of the communities that we serve. And we operate a fairly meaningful operations hub where we have a transfer station, a recycling processing facility, or a MRF. And we are collecting and managing the traditional three streams, right? So solid waste, municipal solid waste, recyclable, mixed recyclables, and organic material. And look, we're a local business that's very steeped in the community, and one that has always been, look, our mission. We've always grounded the mission in just a relentless commitment to sustainability, strong environmental practices, serving our communities with pride and distinction. We consider ourselves, and we are, an essential service provider, so that the work that we do is making a positive impact on the community, obviously in terms of our core functions, but knowing that that has an impact on public safety, public health, the quality of life of the communities in which we operate. And so we came into this really excited about the opportunity. And I know we're going to talk a lot about the process and the challenges associated with it, but the benefits associated with it in the end. But we came into it with a real dedication to wanting to improve as a business, improve our results from a sustainability perspective, from a financial perspective, organizationally and otherwise. So as CEO of the firm, I saw it as an opportunity to go through a really rigorous and a challenging exercise that not only had the potential to culminate in a great distinction like the one we're celebrating here today, but going through the process would make us a better company. And I feel that it has. Up, you're on mute, Rob. You got to unmute.
Bart, you carried a lot of the water on this project, so maybe you could tell us a little bit about, when you first heard about the opportunity. What were some of your initial thoughts? How was your uh, getting into this process? What was that like for you?
Well, thanks, Rob. Yeah, I was very excited to have the opportunity to evaluate, break down exactly what the certification process required. Um, it was a big difference because I work and the company works in a regulatory environment. We work based California law. And what was very interesting is this was a voluntary, performance-based, really KPI-driven process. And it was exciting because we were going to be able to identify, and we did identify gaps and opportunities to make us even better. As part of that process, though, there were some challenges. Obviously, there's a lot of information, so we will get to that a little bit. But
Yeah, yeah.
it's overall a great learning process.
Appreciate that, Bart. So you mentioned KPIs. I'm just curious, if you could sort of discuss how your company KPI, how Sweep's KPIs aligned with MDRR's KPIs, and are there things that we might be overemphasizing or underemphasizing? I'd be curious to see, how what we're trying to achieve from sort of the sustainability, and obviously that includes economic sustainability as well as safety and environmental sustainability. But getting that match right, it's got to make sense for you guys. So we're really interested in how those KPIs lined up from your perspective.
Let me jump in on that, Bart, just in terms
Sure,
of the
please.
company things, and then I think you could add some important color to the heart of Rob's question, which is where is their alignment or where there may be things that weren't totally congruent. I can tell you that from a business standpoint, we've been taking the company broadly through a digital transformation to create, first of all, much greater access to information and data so that we can do better at measuring all aspects of the business to do a better job. It's the old saying, you can't manage what you're not measuring. And I'm a very devout believer in that, and wanted to institute key performance indicators across all aspects of the business so that we could establish baselines, evaluate our performance, set goals, go to work through work plans, and then reflect on whether we're achieving those goals or not, right? Just kind of management 101, but you've got to have discipline and rigor about it, right? So we have KPIs all across the organization, certainly in our core business. How efficiently and productively are we rolling those trucks out, collecting the material? So I'm looking at time, I'm looking at performance on the routes, I'm looking at the tonnages, and coming up with metrics that are helping me on the collection side to assess whether I feel that collection operation is as productive and proficient as it might be. And then similarly, in terms of how we're managing the material. So take my recycling MRF, how many tons are going in, how much recyclables are being recovered, what are the residual rates, how are we improving in terms of the identification and the collection of the recyclables. And then of course I'm looking at a lot of financial metrics associated with that as well, because I'm thinking about ultimately financial performance. But the relationship is there, and I'll hand it to you, Bart, to sort of build upon this. But when we were looking at your KPIs, and a lot that has to do with our own operations and how energy efficient are they, how water efficient are they, how successful are we on the recovery of recyclable materials or organic material, and on down the line, they're certainly aligned with ultimately my goals around performance management and
Mhm.
ultimately financial performance. But
Right.
clearly, Bart, I think you could jump in and identify where maybe some of the things that they wanted us to measure from a KPI perspective were consistent, but maybe somewhat distinct from that.
Yes, actually, thanks, Kish. A lot of the KPIs that were requested or as part of the certification process we had in place. MDRR is very strong when it came to our availability of data. But like a lot of other companies, we have grown in a way where we have our various metrics stored at various different locations within the company. So pulling all of that data together proved to be a bit of a challenge, and to put it into one location. And in fact, a lot of it we found was documented in on paper. So there were manual based documentation, some online and what have you. So just bringing all that data together and meeting the KPI expectations of where of the sweep certification process was a bit of a challenge, but we overcame that. And it was great to work with the sweep team because the team would evaluate what we were putting forward and verify that that KPI was meeting what they were seeking at the time. So it was a very back and forth process, but it did identify. It was an opportunity to showboat our KPIs and identify any potential gaps which were unique. Idle times at the transfer station was one that stood out. It's like, hey, customer idle time. That's a good one. I hadn't thought about that, but we became very aware and started to apply that whole process. So it was a great gap analysis.
That's one of the things that, we were hoping to achieve with Sweep, which was, again, to create a platform. Kish, you mentioned, you can't manage what you don't measure. And we say that you can't measure what you haven't defined. Or if everybody's got, a Tower of Babel of definitions for the same words, which, if you read enough sustainable materials management reports, you'll find that a lot of times the same words are used for different things. So what we're trying to do is slowly but surely come into a consistent set of definitions so that when one company says X and another company says we do X too, that they actually are doing the same thing,
I think that
and
makes a lot of sense. When I was looking at some of the different KPIs that you've been asking about and talking about this with the team when we were going through the process, and even since, I had to ask, okay, so I just have to make sure I'm delineating between our own internal operations and the measurements around our own, energy conservation, water conservation, our own procurement practices, things that are weighed heavily, I think, on the scoring and ultimately our attainment, but then also our achievement around the work that we're doing on behalf of our customers, right? So diversion and waste reduction and greenhouse gas reductions, some of the other key things that are really important in the performance KPIs that were part of the scoring system that you all developed. So I do think you're right. I do think that for especially someone like me, that's going to have to be for others that would undertake this process, you're going to need senior leadership that's going to be executive sponsors and champions of this effort. It is, and I think it is important, and to the extent that it's always important to have real precision and clarity about what those definitions are, so
right.
that we know what are we really going into and how are we being evaluated, both because we want to achieve it, but again, for me to assess, is it worthwhile to go through the effort? Because I believe that by going through the exercise, it'll strengthen our organization because the areas that we're going to be measured on are valuable to me in general.
Yeah. I mean, the 13 years I spent spearheading the development of the lead system, we were completely wandering in the Sinai, no idea what was going on. But eventually we learned as we went, and the boundary issues. When does something become something or not? And that there's always some gray areas in there, and that's still understanding where the boundaries are, figuring out where the gray areas are. How do you decide which side of the line it's on? These are all part of what a pilot would do. And you guys were really great in helping us talk through and understanding, more clearly where those boundaries are, while still recognizing that there's going to be interpretation of what those aspects are. And so I guess, what we're trying to do is, minimize the busy work. And I know there was probably some busy work. So, are there certain things, do you have any particularly specific things that you would prefer not to have to do next time? Some things that, I mean, you mentioned the idle time as an aha. Were there any like, oh, I can't believe I'm wasting my time on this stuff? Because again, we look, this has got to be used and useful. And
Mhm.
so, if we're wasting your time, that's not a good thing. And so, sometimes things they just take a lot of time, but and they're
Mhm.
worth it. But sometimes they take a lot of time and are probably not worth it. So again, hearing straight from you what you think some of those areas are would be super helpful.
Well,
I I'll tell you
yeah, go ahead,
honestly,
Bart.
if you might, the person who kind of leads the charge needs to establish a team and be prepared to go across organizational boundaries, understand the metrics and the different boundaries. So just that step alone and pulling a team together to consolidate the information is a big challenge. So it has a lot to do, I think, with just the ability of the team, the core team that is doing this. They maybe preliminary input as to, hey, this is probably what you're going to need, and these are the kind of professionals you will need in your
Mhm.
organization to be able to handle
Right.
this permitting process, because the cross-organizational strength of the company is what ultimately leads to a certification, especially a higher level, like a platinum level certification.
Yeah, let me add to that. I think that's right, and I think what Bart is saying is super important, and it comes back to what my point about you're going to need leadership that sees value in the process generally, and sees opportunities within the process specifically to strengthen areas of the organization as a whole. And so, this topic that we're talking about of data, look, I'm sure we're a very typical company. I actually think we're kind of an atypical, medium-sized independent waste company in terms of how much investment of time and effort and money we're putting into strengthening our data environment, deploying tools inside of our organization that allow us to manage the business across the different functions, but to try to have systems that are interoperable, that are talking to each other, where data can be brought into more of a centralized place so the information can be more readily accessible. You can verify it better. The veracity of the data is improved and it's more
Yeah.
usable. That's a process, Rob, that we were undertaking as a business as this sweep certification process was underway. And to me, I saw it as very valuable because it became a catalyst
Mhm.
and it became an illustration of how and what where the silos existed and why it's valuable to use this exercise as a broader opportunity to improve our data environment and our reporting capabilities as an organization. But that had to come from me because, as Bart has mentioned, you have managers in other departments that we've also tasked with day-to-day functions. And, this is my day job. And now here comes, oh my God, here comes Kish with another, out of the
Unfunded
ivory
mandate.
tower project. Here comes Bart, who's the do-gooder inside of the organization. All I'm seeing is more work and distraction from what's supposed to be my daily, my daily functions.
Yeah.
And, we had to work through that as an organization and get folks bought into the idea that the sweep certification was valuable in and of itself, but because to achieve the platinum status is a worthwhile accomplishment to pursue, but it also I had bigger goals associated with the exercise.
Yeah.
And so I think that really mattered.
Were there any light bulb moments where people, what was it that kind of flipped it from kind of pulling on the leash to, going along with it?
I'll give you a quick answer, and then Bart, please jump
Sure.
in too. But I would say that the other thing, look, we are an environmental company where sustainability really drives what we do. But look, we also can get very kind of grounded into the day in and day out achievement. You got to pick up the material, you got to move the material. I'm looking at financial statements much more than I'm looking at our sustainability report. I mean, to be, that's where, but when I look up and start to go back and read the details of our annual sustainability report that also kind of coincided with this, and realizing that the work that we're doing to achieve environmental and sustainability objectives, and attaching it to materials management in this context, those are really laudable, important uh, elements of who we are as a company that you sometimes can lose sight of because you're just staring at spreadsheets all day. And I
Mhm.
think that seeing the connection between that core mission and how we're getting better at that core mission, so it is actually, it's harmonious with my objectives to try to drive better financial results and make us a more competitive business. I think you could find that people within our company that had slightly different perspectives or slightly different priorities, and goals, could see that this was something that could bring us together,
Mhm.
and create real alignment around that work. And that's what kind of helped, I think, foster that buy-in, because people could see that this wasn't just some feel-good exercise that was really not going to produce anything meaningful or tangible, but really rather it was quite the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have to add there, we are very well adept to the ground floor requirements of the California regulatory environment, permitting, how to manage our organics, CRV enforcement, so on. But what was fascinating was working with the other team members, promoting this amongst the group, and then seeing that they were starting to see that, hey, Sweep is actually targeting a ceiling performance. It's moving towards excellence in our KPI and the data transparency and the circularity of what we're doing, and even community engagement. Once there was a lot of aha moments with the different groups as we actually reached out beyond just what was the regulatory requirements.
That's really exciting. So, what we've seen in this pilot phase is that, and, there are no doubt that there are silos in the building industry, but the silos between collection and recovery and disposal I mean, they are very, very well armored in the
Mhm.
waste industry, if you will. And again, there are good reasons for that, because you guys have a lot of really complicated stuff to do, and not a lot of time to do it in. But I think, as you noted, that when those verticals start cooperating horizontally, there are significant synergies. And that's one of the things that we're trying to, promote here. And it's super gratifying to hear that that was the case. But, we
Mhm.
would, one of the things that was a real pain in the neck, and that was in part because, the platform we were using, required this, but, entering the same data in three different times. Like, if you ask the collection guys how many tons are processed by the company, that's different from the number of tons that the recovery guys are going to give you, which is different from the number of tons the disposal guys are going to give you. It may not
Mhm.
be off by a lot, but when your package says, well, these all have to match, it can take months to, get everybody on the same page. And that's, one of the things that we're going to be doing is, in streamlining, is having one sort of hub where, organization-wide data gets put in, and it gets automatically populated in every place that you need it automatically for the calculation, so that you don't have to keep putting the same number in a bunch of different places, just because,
Mhm.
the structure of the platform, requires that.
Well, I have to
Great.
tell you, I when I went back, just sort of in preparation for this conversation, and went back and looked at so much of the work product that and the effort that had to go into preparing our application and working it through to our ultimate success. But it was a tremendous amount of work, and things are moving very quickly in the marketplace, as we know, in terms of the availability of these advanced tools that you're talking about. And we're doing that too. Again, we're still on this journey of continuing as a business through our digital transformation and the deployment of the most sort of powerful tools that are out there. And I called Bart and I said, Bart, I have to tell you, with what we're working on with some of the AI tools that we are now deploying inside of our environment, if we had had those just even 2 years ago, I think a
Mhm.
lot of the work that you had to do that was quite laborious, quite manual, or, as you said, or redundant, or what have you. I think capitalizing upon these advanced tools that could break through a lot of that burden, not only I think would make more companies or organizations willing to participate. I think the outcomes would be better. And I think it would be a much more valuable exercise if you, because just getting through that initial um, emotional hurdle and the initial, literal hurdles of trying to, compile what's necessary. I think to the greatest extent, obviously, that we can minimize the brain damage associated with that and just get on with the more fun parts of what we're
Yes.
doing.
Yeah.
The better success we'll have.
Yep. Yeah. And we're, our goal, you mentioned AI. So, we are mapping out a series of AI tools that will help organizations, local governments do a rapid assessment of their program and map it onto the sweep standard. And so that gives a gap analysis because, one of the first questions whenever when we're talking to people, the first question they ask is, well, how much time is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? And there are two things you have to know. You have to know where you are, and you have to know where you want to go, right? Once and knowing where you want to go is, well, are you going to get certified silver, gold, platinum? But you still need to know the starting point. And once you have that gap analysis and you know where you're going to go, then you can reasonably assess what the level of effort is. And again, to your point, we hope to regulate the ordinary through AI to free the creative to get the real business and operational and environmental and safety goals that we're all striving for implemented in the field.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Well, that's really exciting. And again, it's very consistent with what we're trying to do. And I, go back to what I've said, which is, for me, this process, insofar as it has been a catalyst, it's pushed us towards better internal capabilities and performance. It's identified where we need to add capacity within our own organization to achieve larger goals. The investment that we made in this process has been very worthwhile, and it will continue to be worthwhile because I think the returns are meaningful based on these broader business objectives that we have. And so I think adding these tools, however, to facilitate, expedite moving through these processes faster and with less friction and less kind of brute force, obviously will motivate us to do even more.
Yeah.
I was going to say, with the leadership commitment, and you actually go through and complete your scorecard and become certified, it'll be so much easier to continue to progress and improve and maintain certification going forward. So any certificant that is pursuing this, once they've achieved this, with these utilizing the new tools that are coming on board, the certification process does not get harder. It does get easier.
Well, that's when I was out promoting LEAD, I said, you're investing in Green Building University, and once you got your degree, then the returns are there for you for the rest of your life. It's similar. We're you've paid your tuition to Sustainable Materials Management University, and now you've got all the tools you need, and again, a continued ongoing framework for how to make it better. Going forward, and hope we're going to be later this year, early next year, releasing training and accreditation program. And one of the big challenges we found with some of our other things where there wasn't quite the same commitment from the leadership. There would be a sustainability director on top of it, but that's like asking a writer in Hollywood to get the movie done. It's not, there's in buildings there's the architect, but there's with the CEO is the architect. You're not going to get any line person taking that architect role. But what we're hoping is that through the sweep assessor model, we'll be able to have firms go through kind of a sustainable materials management plan process that is essentially sweep ready. And then all you need to do is, hit go. And then, in the plan, in the normal process, whether you're a local government or a company doing a plan where you're, tracking what you've done, where you're going to go, that's pretty much what sweep is trying to do right now. And, look, we are data and aspiration heavy initially, because what we want to try and do is have a common platform for sustainable materials management, common vocabulary, and a commitment. And then as we get those goals set, more and more emphasis will be not on saying what we're going to do, but what we've actually accomplished. And that as time goes, we will move the points more towards the implementation side and less on the policy side. But we put a lot of points on the credits on the policy side because we wanted to get people understanding what their um what their platform and aspirations are.
And I
Right.
thought it was useful. I mean, look, I was, part of what attracted me to this in the beginning. I just share the view around clarity of purpose. And you have to have policies that are written down, that are well thought out and written down and well vetted to have clarity of purpose. So I think getting the policies right and working with you all to refine and, or in some cases, prepare or produce, the right policy statements around the different sweep categories was useful because it kind of challenged us to think about, okay, what are our intentions as a business and what are we trying to accomplish through this particular process? I think was valuable. And then as we've been saying, then to go in and look at our execution and then to sign up for the data to measure whether we're achieving it or not. Again, it resonated with me because it's really how we think about how we want to manage the business anyway. So I do think the policy side is an important ingredient alongside execution and measurement.
Great.
It was
Yeah,
exciting at some points, Rob, when you were able to highlight some of the wonderful things the company is doing. So,
right.
as an example, source reduction initiatives, MDRR is the best. I mean, we've got everything promoting education, reuse, bicycle repair, donation, food rescue or food support. I mean, the company is dabbling in some great things that were allowed me to showcase that as part of the
Yeah.
application process, which is very cool.
Did you have a chance to talk about Sweep with any of your customers, either your municipal customers or commercial customers? I'm just curious whether that was something that ever came up, and what were folks' reaction to that?
Yeah, I was actually partnering. I was getting in the process of partnering with marketing and communications to bridge that communication with some of our local municipalities. I haven't spoken in great depth with them about it. I'm not sure of the resources they have available to do it or who the designated individuals will be, but I'll guarantee you that will be a conversation that I will push forward during the very near future.
So if
I'll
you,
just add
oh,
to
sorry,
that.
go ahead. Yeah,
Sorry,
please.
I'll just add to that really quickly that so for me, obviously another broad objective for me is for our business to be more competitive in general. Now we live in a franchise area for the waste and recycling business. So by that I mean local jurisdictions, cities and counties come together. They bid out their waste and recycling, hauling and processing services, typically to one provider, who then is their long-term contracted provider for those services. But those contracts do come up for bid on a occasional basis. And when they do, look, I feel selfishly that we've demonstrated through this sweet platinum attainment that we have demonstrated commitments and capabilities and measurable, verifiable results that would make a real difference to their constituents, their residents, if we were their service provider. So yes, we are touting sweep to local jurisdictions, local community groups, community stakeholders, community leaders to get them to understand that we see this as a demonstration of our commitments and our capabilities that should make a difference if they decide that they want to go out to the marketplace and potentially bring in a new service provider for their community. So it is marketing for me, candidly, as a business. But I think it's also, if I might, look, I served on a city council in my community not that long ago. And when you serve on those public boards, you do that for important reasons. You
Yeah.
want to have a positive impact on your community. And so I think my former colleagues or people that are here in the region learning about sweep and understanding how it can be an important indicator of companies that have the right kind of capabilities and commitments that would make a difference in their communities. I think that's something that they're interested to know about, and it's something that we're certainly promoting.
Yeah. Well, and as a municipal official, one would imagine that, hey, I'm asking you to do something. How do I know I get what I asked for, right?
Mm.
Because I mean, the company could tell you anything, but when you have a third party verifying everything and working, making sure that everything is properly done, then you get a lot more assurance that, your programs are performing as advertised, and that, and maybe if you want to do a green bond or something like that, to increase it, and people want to, some sort of proof of the pudding of what you're doing, is this going to be worth it? So that's kind of the, another one of the impetuses for this to show internally we're doing what we think we want to do, but also showing to the outside, your regular customers, and as well as your sort of corporate and municipal customers as well, that yeah, we are delivering what we said, and not only delivering what we said, but we're delivering more, right?
I think that's right.
Yeah. So with folks' indulgence, I'm gonna jump a little bit into a kind of update in sweep, some of the things that, when we're going back and forth with pilots like MDRR, they pointed stuff out that wasn't working, or, as we're trying to figure stuff out on our end, things aren't working. And so, share some of the improvements that we've made and some of the changes that we've made, and hopefully we can get some of the folks on this webinar involved with approving the standard, that the new standard that we've come up with, which we think will be a lot easier to understand and a lot easier to implement because it's a clearer process. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on our mission. It's to create a sustainable materials management framework, and we started it quite some time ago. It does take a while to pull these things together, but I'm taking a page from lead background, but also learning lots about what doesn't apply in doing it. We've talked about managing. Can't manage what you don't measure. Can't measure what you haven't defined, and that's one of the things that we do. So just to understand, there's a blizzard of acronym certifications out there, and particularly, we've been asked what's the difference between true and sweep, and true came first. Green building certifications to U.S. Green Building Council were, are the managers of that process, and so we wanted very, very clearly not to compete with existing standards, right? Because I need to develop a new standard like I need a new hole in my head. But True does a great job of dealing with what is happening up to the curb within the facility, which is a vitally, vitally important piece in the chain. But the question is what happens after that. And really, there's no guarantee that once the truck takes it away, because the guy in the building's not going to be able to evaluate the downstream infrastructure. So we designed sweep to try and fit as closely to the things that folks in True were doing, so that they could say, all right, we did this with our organics, and we know because of sweep the organics actually went to the place that they said they did. So they're intended to be complementary, intended to be at a larger scale, sweep for neighborhoods or cities kind of thing, or lead for neighborhoods and cities. Waste has waste elements to it. So what we tried to do is fill a hole that was in the certification landscape. So governments, sort of the broader corporate ecosystem, suppliers, consultants, et cetera, are part of it, as well as folks doing research and advocates for sustainable materials management, no food waste, et cetera. Those are all very important pieces of the ecosystem, and all are welcome and contribute significantly to sweep. So not unlike lead, we have certain categories, 100 base points. They're distributed. Like I said, the policies and waste generation prevention is really getting your data platform set up. So almost half the points are focused on the policy and just saying what you're going to do, and then the rest of the points are actually doing. And as I mentioned, those points will migrate less from saying and more towards doing down the road. Just a note on the disposal, we don't give you any credit for throwing things away, but reality is that 80% of the materials right now, or 70% of the materials right now that are put in the bin, do end up in a landfill. So properly managing those landfills is a very important piece of it. One of the changes we made, for example, was early on, if you didn't have a landfill, well, you just didn't get those points, right? But it didn't change the denominator. So we were asking people, we were holding people responsible, particularly local governments, for things they had no control over. And if you want to make somebody mad, just penalize them for something that they have absolutely no control over. So again, we learned that lesson pretty quickly. And I'll be honest, we thought that local government contracting and other kinds of measurements had a lot more weight than they actually do. And so in the reconfiguration of this new standard, we've made it very clear that the standard only applies to the things that you actually control. So one of the things that the AI gap analysis is going to do is going to say, where's your boundary? What do you actually do? And then that will be your bespoke sweep set of credits. And it'll still be 100 points, but it'll be changing over time. It'll still be based on 100%, but the number of credits that represents that 100% denominator will change. So not unlike LEED, or exactly like LEED. We've got certified silver, gold, platinum as our Sweep Plus designations. And it's basically based on the original, it's on a percentage of points. Eventually we will have a zero waste standard, which we may or may not call Sweep Zero, but you're either zero or not. And that will be sort of the next stage. And that will be like, sort of like the living building standard in buildings. It'll be all requirements, and there's, no options. You either do this or you don't get it. So we're still working on that, but we're also going to be working on a sweep certification for, companies that are, in jurisdictions that may not have as much, have as good a regulatory, basis as California does, and give on-ramps into, the sustainable materials management process, but without having to quite achieve the level of an advanced company like Mount Diablo. Mentioned we had, when MDRR first looked at it, we had the requirements for local governments next to the requirements for businesses. And there were a couple of times where we had to sort of say, no, you don't have to do this. That's only local governments. So we realized, and then we assumed that they were all these credits were equally applicable to each, side of the equation, sort of the user and the service provider. And we realized that that's just not the case, that there are things that are very clearly in the purview of governments that do not apply or have an analogy to the industry sector, and vice versa. So we or separated the two standards, and then there's a local government standard, and there's an industry standard, and that makes it shorter. There's less, fewer pages to work through. We had a complicated. What we're trying to do is encourage local governments and service providers to work together, and so we've changed the incentive structure around that, given more incentives for cooperation. Say if a local government provides information to a service provider that shows that this is met, then the service provider gets the credit as well as the local government, and vice versa. If the service provider does something that helps achieve one of the goals that maybe the local government doesn't do, they get credit for that, and then they each get credit for sharing the information with each other. So we're trying to give some bonus points away to folks to do that. And so sorry. And then like I said, you want to make somebody mad. Make them responsible for something they don't have any control over. So we've created much stricter boundaries for, and this will be evaluated, with a few questions. Do you do X, do you Y, and that will let you know whether this credit applies to you or not. And so we've had we did some credit consolidation and integrated them a little bit. And there are going to be some credits that aren't applicable or just unachievable to you, but you're still going to get, you could do them, but you may not choose to. And again, the reality is, COVID did shake things up quite a bit, and we realized, the reality is that recovered material performance has degraded over the last decade, pretty significantly, and so. The whole point of a market transformation standard is to attach it to the market. If it's too far from the market, then it's just going to be pulling itself. You got a couple of projects and not a lot of movement. So we wanted to lower the threshold to get more projects in the train. And what that meant was that the top the spread in performance of the top quartile of the market, which is where Sweep Plus is focused, it's just a lot broader than we thought. And we've mentioned the streamlined documentation requirements, less brain damage. And we've also realized that, going through this process every year was a lot. So what we're going to be doing is, if you get certified, you're good for 3 years. And we will require some attestation of just basically saying not much has changed, and if something's changed, we'll update you more. And then so let's see here. And then so next steps, new standards are up. Please download them from the website. And we're still working on whether we're going to have a 30 or 60-day initial comment period. We're going to be getting experts onto what we call a national consensus committee to get the standard voted on. And so let's see here. All right, let me okay, there we go. And then that means that we're following a consensus leadership standard process. Anyone who is interested in the industry and or works in the industry can become part of a consensus committee. And basically, we want people looking at the standard and its implementation from a variety of perspectives to ensure that we're meeting all of the requirements of the key constituents. So the comment draft is on, and basically we're looking at comments. We will be implementing comments and then putting a new draft on, which is the one that will be balloted. And then that gets voted on. And if we have a consensus, then we will either that will be the final draft and adopted, or if there's some substantive changes that are required, we will implement those and have a final vote. So basically, when the ballot comes out, you either approve with comments, disapprove with comments, or abstain. And half of the consensus committee must participate. And our job as Sweep is to ensure that all of the negative comments are approved. Obviously, comments have to be germane. Not going to go into that detail right now, but there will be a voting period, and once the quorum has been established and the majority of the consensus committee either approves it. If they don't approve, then we go back to the drawing board, implement changes, and start the process over. So we will have a public information meeting, and there will be an announcement for that. We will have meetings of the National Consensus Committee to go through any comments, hash through any questions, etc. hopefully we will get a final adoption of the standard, and we will launch it later this year, early next year. So hopefully folks are interested in being a leader in sustainable materials management. We've seen how the benchmark and performance thing does align with leading companies. And with EPR and a lot of things out there, we're seeing a lot of changes, and hopefully what we can do is use sweep to get ahead of those and maybe drive the change, because these the regulatory changes, I believe, are going to come a lot faster than anybody imagines, because we're bumping up against some pretty nasty physical, not just fiscal, but physical constraints. Love to have people get involved with our committees, join SWEEP as a member, participate in a pilot, reach out to me. info@sweepstandard.org is the best way, and we will have a conversation. We've had a lot of really great folks contributing to the development of the standard, so hope to keep that going. And there are discounts on SWEEP products and service, participation in the committee, helping set that framework for the future. Get your work showcased in a webinar, and then get media coverage through articles and stuff like that. So we've got a couple of questions here. If you have questions for me, but way more importantly, Mount Diablo, please use the Q&A or the chat. First question that came in: does the sweep process result in publicly available diversion rates? So, we can sort of say, so first of all, any company has the right to not share their information, right? If people want to keep their actual achievements confidential, that is up to them. And so before we go sharing actual performance data, we would consult with any organization. What we will do as we gather more aggregate data is we will say sweep certified projects as a whole do X compared to market averages Y. But again, we know that advanced performance can be a competitive advantage, but it can also be a trade secret. So we don't want to give people secret sauce away. Even though they're out there touting their results, people may want to maintain that leadership position and not necessarily share how they did it. But if people want to, we will absolutely make those resources available. And so that is the answer to that question. And then we had another question about if there's a role for sweep in validating and managing what is called responsible end markets for its consumers and in communities served with what is a fragmented and distributed recycling and of circularity systems. I think that's a great question. We believe that circular economy is a great local job and social development tool. We do have a number of credits that say if companies or local governments develop policies and programs to create end markets for products, or bring the end markets of their recovered products closer, that is rewarded. So that's what we want to do. We want to have companies, because you mentioned Kish and Bart mentioned earlier that what we do internally is also really important as what the external impact is. So in other words, we want to walk the talk internally while we are meeting public policy goals. And we try and have a lot of those elements. Like, if your MRF is energy efficient, you get credit for that. And you obviously get credit for the effectiveness of that MRF in recovering material. So that we try and get both sides of that. So
I would jump in and just on that.
I would love to give you guys the last words.
I just on that point very quickly, and I know we're just about out of time, but look, I mean, here in California, the SB 54, the EPR law is being implemented as we speak. A big part again of why sweep was important to me as a diagnostic tool was to look at the quality of the performance of our recycling operation, both in terms of how we manage and run that, how effective our recovery rates are. But then as thinking about end markets, I mean, look, the recycling processors in the country, certainly in California, that are going to be the winners over time are the ones that are the most effective at recovery, the most proficient in terms of their operations, and most capable of sorting materials that then can get to end users that can do better to ensure the recyclability that we want around these products. And so I would just, to the question around responsible end markets and sort of tying it into that broader policy objective and environment that companies like mine are going to have to operate in, I do see benefits of the sweep process to be able to help me validate where I'm headed with my recycling processing operation for longer term success.
Well, that's a great intro to the next question that came in. So you mentioned that your constituents appreciate your sustainability efforts. How important is this to them, and is this interest in sustainability growing?
Yes, it's very important to them. And yes, it is growing. I think there's a lot greater awareness on the part of the typical, citizen out there that we've got major environmental challenges globally, and therefore we've got to try to think about how we, act locally and think globally in terms of expectations for companies like mine. I think they want to see results. They want to see performance. They want to believe that recycling is real and that if they participate, we're delivering real results, real tangible impacts that can be associated with that. I think California's Law 1383, which is about greater standards for the diversion of organic material away from landfills, because it's so clear about the production of greenhouse gases from landfills if they have too much organic material there. I think constituents and residents are developing a greater awareness and expectations around this. Now, look, here's the flip side. The more sophisticated and complex our operations become, the costlier they become, and that gets passed into the rates. And I think that constituents out there, ratepayers, still believe very much in the mission and the objectives of greater environmental and sustainability performance. But they're also going to want to know, but is the service provider someone that I really believe am I getting at a value for what I'm paying in terms of my rates?
Yep.
And this, again, goes back to me as a business leader. I want my business to be more competitive. And I think for me to be able to demonstrate that I'm doing well by the environment and doing well by the ratepayer at the same time is a big part of that.
That's perfect. Great. So one final question: does sweep allow for disposal via waste to energy? Currently, Sweep Plus does not. We had a credit in there, but we couldn't get agreement. That the only place we could get agreement is if advanced emissions were demonstrated by the waste to energy technology, and we could not get agreement on that particular overlap. Industry and advocates could not agree on a spot, so we decided to take it out of sweep. Plus, it will probably be in the mid-market standard. So a waste energy facility, if it controls stormwater, if it controls litter, if it has safety programs, there are a lot of credits that are available for the proper operation of a waste to energy facility. And like I said, we don't give any credit to any thing for disposal. But we do give credit for good management. So I think there are maybe 1 or 2 points in the disposal section that are not applicable to waste to energy, but a well-managed waste to energy facility is eligible for points. I can't tell you what a great conversation this has been. You guys are so awesome. It's been an absolute joy working with you guys, and I just, it's going to be wonderful seeing how you guys take off, and just wishing you the best of success. And again, just congratulations on a magnificent achievement. And thank you.
Well, thank you to you and your team, Rob. It's been as we've tried to convey here. It's been a worthwhile process. It was tough in a good way. It's made us a better company. We're looking forward to continuing on the journey, and looking forward to continuing our work together.
Thanks so much to
Thank you,
everybody
Rob.
who joined us today, and we'll be sending out around a link um, with the video for everybody. And so, really love this conversation. So thanks so much, and have a wonderful
Cheers.
Memorial Day weekend to everybody.
Thanks, folks. Be
Yeah,
well.
take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks.